Tallgrass prairie currently is the most threatened landform in the world. At one time in North America, it was probably the largest, or certainly one of the largest. The tallgrass as an ecosystem stretched from southern Canada down through the center of the United States all the way to the Gulf of Mexico. It's a very robust, hardy, vigorous, healthy ecosystem that was shaped by climate. We get about 38 inches of rainfall here, which is enough to produce all this luxurious prairie forage. But we also get hot, dry time. So these prairie plants have, a lot of them have pretty deep roots. The prairie was also shaped by fire. It's practiced mostly by Native Americans. We know 20,000 years ago this was a spruce jack pine forest. And it was shaped by grazing, primarily by bison. The species of bison that we have now is only about 5,000 years old. So they were shaped by the prairies, and they in turn shaped the prairie. So that's why the bison are back here, is for the grazing influence they provide and the ecological force that they bring to this landscape.
What you're seeing here is our 25th annual bison roundup. We gather the herd each fall, and really kind of two primary reasons that we touch our big woolly animals. First is health maintenance. It's very important to maintain the integrity, the health of the herd, not only for ourselves but for the comfort of our neighbors. We don't want to come into a livestock dominated neighborhood and have our animals be perceived as a problem. So health maintenance is a big thing. And then also I think of this as our point in time predation. So the large predators, of course, are gone from this ecosystem, which would have primarily been the wolf back in pre-settlement days. A few grizzly bears, but the wolf would have been the main predator that controlled bison numbers. And so that's our job now. So Roundup is an opportunity to pull off what we consider to be surplus animals, to keep our stocking rate under a conservative rate. And so the animals that you see coming through that end up in a pen, those are animals that are being sold. So we've gone through a sealed bid process within the last month to identify and select our buyers. And so a bunch of our animals this year are going to Texas and some are going to Iowa. And so it's really kind of those two functions is what Roundup is all about.
Been involved with this project since it was an idea, and that started in 1984, and Don Nichols set up a task force to look into this idea, and I was appointed to that task force. And a bill was introduced in the United States Senate in 1987 to establish a Tallgrass Prairie National Preserve, and in 1988 that bill died, and this land was for sale, and it hadn't been for sale for generations. Chapman and Barnard put this ranch together starting in 1915, and it just wasn't for sale. Mr. Chapman died in 1966, Mr. Barnard died in 1970, and the fellow that was to take over the operation of the ranch for the family died, and so there was nobody to run it. And they leased it out for a while, then they decided to sell it. So the opportunity to purchase a significant chunk of tallgrass prairie was a very special opportunity. And the Nature Conservancy realized that if quick action wasn't taken, that opportunity would soon be lost. So in 1989, the Nature Conservancy purchased the 29,000 acres owned by the Barnard family. And that became the cornerstone for the Tallgrass Prairie Preserve. So in 1993, on October 18, 1993, we reintroduced 300 bison onto 5,000 acres on the preserve. That has since grown to where we have about 26 to 2,700 bison that will be free roaming on about 25,000 acres. So we do the roundup to cull surplus animals. We'll sell about 600 animals this year, and also give them their inoculations. We have a very stringent disease prevention program, and the idea is to not let diseases get started.
Roundup really started about a month ago. as we pull the animals gradually out of their 24,000 acre pasture. The preserve is about 40,000 acres, and the bison have about 2/3 of that is part of their property. And so starting about a month ago, our guys start sooking them or pulling the animals into smaller and smaller pastures. We pull them out of that big pasture into about 3,800 acres, and then into about 1,400 acres, and then into about 200 acres where you see the animals just to the west of the pens right now. And then this morning, starting of each day, then we bring in the number of animals that we think we can roughly work in a day, which is usually about 500 or so adults. And so we get out there with a bunch of pickups and we sweep in about 500 animals. And then it's the process in the corral of getting them down into smaller and smaller packages until ultimately each animal is individually constrained in a squeeze chute. Kind of a mechanical hug, I think, of to kind of immobilize that animal. And at that point then we lean in with our electronic scanner and try to scan their microchip tags that are in their ear. That brings up a computer record, identifies who that animal is, basically, how old they are, where they came from, all their genetic history and everything. And so at that point then we determine whether they're a keeper or a seller, and that determines then of course what shots they get, what tags they get. Quite often our buyers want us to go ahead, since they're coming through the squeeze chute anyway, we'll go ahead and do some inoculations that they request. We buy the meds and then they reimburse us for that. But since we have them in the squeeze chute anyway, that's one less trip. And so a lot of times with our sale animals, we're giving them shots and tagging them also. So it's really a matter of identifying that individual and then what its fate is, and then everybody sweeps in and does their business. If everything works pretty smoothly, the animal's in the squeeze chute for only about 40 to 50 seconds, and then it's out, and then we're on to the next animal. As you get them separated from the herd, they get very panicky, and they get really agitated, and so it's important to keep moving very quickly so that they can't hurt themselves or hurt other bison. And if it all goes well, it's a very smooth operation.
The plains bison almost became extinct. It's a miracle we have bison now. And you can hear a lot of figures, but most people say that the plains bison got down to 541 animals. From 30 to 60 million to 541 is a huge bottleneck. So the genetic diversity in the bison gene pool now is not that big. We think we have it as diverse as it's possible to get it. Several years ago, we started a DNA testing program. We pulled hair samples from the bison, and Jim Durr from Texas A&M University, who's an internationally known geneticist, he analyzed the DNA on the bison, and we removed any female bison that had cattle mitochondrial DNA in their gene pool. So we think we have as genetically pure a bison herd as it's possible to have.